Can you have too much joy? Can you have too much happiness?
I've got that joy down in my heart.
Let's talk about that in this video.
Where?
And I'm Marie Hopkinson, Herbalist, Acupuncturist. Today on the Chinese Medicine Podcast, we're going to talk about this idea of the emotions, the 5 elements, and how these things affect our physical body, our mental body, and how we can help ourselves either with emotions, using emotions to help our physical body, or understand why these things are happening to me. Why do I feel excessive joy? And what that might mean. So joy isn't just joy in Chinese medicine. It's including these ideas of pleasure, of happiness, of euphoria. So the answer to the first question is no, you can't have too much joy, right? Pure joy, like just feeling happy. But there are spectrums of these types of emotions that can be damaging to us and can be unrealistic to expect that we would have that. So for most people on this planet, you will not experience joy all the time. And even in a mental disorder, that can be part of like a bipolar disorder, for instance. When someone has a manic episode, they might experience an extreme amount of pleasure and happiness and euphoric, or be seeking that and not able to stop that, and not able to realize the full detriment of the consequences of things that could happen as a result of that seeking. And that's a great example of something that would be completely out of control and out of balance, and how Chinese medicine would see that aspect of mania. It could be in a bipolar disorder, it could be in other mental health disorders. So let's pretend we don't have any disorders here. We just are thinking about this idea of the emotions and how that affects our body. So our ability to feel pleasure, to feel happy, to feel good, and this could range from feeling content and grateful, like often that is part of happiness. Like you desire other things, but you also still feel grateful and gratitude for what you have now. And you feel a sense of contentment in that. You could also think of joy as an absence of an overwhelming sense of other emotions. For instance, if you had an overwhelming sense of sadness, you could still have joy in your life, but it might be hard. You wouldn't be feeling joy or happiness at that moment because that sadness is kind of overshadowing things. So let's say I had a really great life and everything was going good, and I was like, yes, today's great. And then this has happened to me before. You get some news that someone has passed away. And you're obviously going to have sadness, you're going to have grief. And it doesn't mean that I don't have that happiness or that pleasure, but I just feel like I can't experience those two emotions exactly simultaneously at that moment. So part of perhaps joy is the absence of some of these other emotions. Same as with anger. If you're feeling happy and good, and then something happens, and then you're so angry about that, it's almost like, well, you've taken away my joy because I'm feeling so angry about that other thing. So you could think of happiness or joy in one of those ways. The fire element is one of these elements that has 2 sets of organs, the pericardium and the heart, as the yin side of it, and the sanjiao and the triple warmer or triple burner organ and this small intestine. So without getting into too much detail about what those things are, especially triple warmer, sanjiao, if you're not a Chinese medicine person, don't worry about that kind of thing right now. Too much of a rabbit hole to go down. So what that attribution in Chinese medicine is linking an elemental structure, an elemental concept to these organs, so they have a similar function. The pericardium and the heart in Chinese medicine are very similarly related, and it's often said that the pericardium mirrors the heart or buffers the heart. So it takes the brunt of things before the heart kind of physically is even damaged, right? So if you've got an infection, it would go to the pericardium before it would go to the heart to kind of protect you. And in some schools of Chinese medicine, they actually name the pericardium the heart protector. I think in shiatsu they often use that term, the heart protector. So getting back to the emotions, the pericardium itself is more concerned with pleasure and desire.
Nice.
So on one hand, you could have a lack of desire, and on the other hand, you could have, at the other end of the scale, you could have too much desire. So desire is like, I want something. I'm interested in something. Could be someone. I'm interested in a person.
How do I know if she wants me to take her?
And, oh, that person doesn't love me back. And then this desire kind of takes over your life. And think back to when you were a teenager, or maybe you're a teenager now watching this and you think, yeah, that's me. Desire is taking over my life. It depends on what physical state is in your body. Also, how often you've experienced these emotions, about how we can control them, or do they just kind of seem to overtake us, control over us. So at different stages of life, you might feel more easier to control your emotions because you've experienced them before and you kind of have that going on. But there is a space within this system of thinking that this whole thing can get so out of balance that it becomes almost impossible for you to control it. And that would be the bipolar situation, where someone's got a mental disorder where they can't control it. It just happens to them, and they're like, I'm overcome with this desire. For some people with bipolar, they're overcome with desire to shop,
clothes, treat yourself,
to purchase things,
fragrances,
treat yourself,
massages,
treat yourself,
mimosas,
treat yourself.
They want to buy things, and then
fine leather goods.
And they later on regret it when they've come down from that manic episode. Or a sexual desire, they maybe have more promiscuity than they would have in their life otherwise. This wanting something for yourself is part of that. Now, in the 5 elements, they're a cycle. It's not just one element by itself. So what precedes this is wood. Wood generates fire, or gives birth to fire. So you need wood to make a fire, literally. Motivation and life planning and seeing things in the future for your life is a part of the wood element. So that kind of gives birth to desire. So if I don't know what I want for my life, it's very hard for me to desire the next thing that I'm after, the next thing that I'm, looking for. So it might be a better career opportunity. But if I have no idea that I want a career, or that I even want to succeed in the career area, that would be a lack of that wood. And that could be you might be watching this thinking, yeah, I don't have any desire, I wish I had that desire. It might be addressing the wood element that's needed to kind of fix that aspect of things. And why do people have a lack of wood? Well, that could be also a lack of the previous. The water, wood, fire kind of goes in that order. So that's something that an acupuncturist or a herbalist would kind of address in that way. So it could be a seasonal thing as well. This is why we have the summer of love.
In the summertime when the weather is high.
Because summer is related to fire. And it makes sense that we would seek these things in this season. So you might be coming into winter if you're in the US. And it's natural for almost our desire to go a little dormant in that time. It doesn't mean that you fall out of love with the partner that you're with, but it's natural for that to kind of go through that process, whereas it's natural for it to kind of ramp up in the summertime. Where I am in Australia, we're just coming into spring right now as I'm making this video, and so this would be normal for desire to sort of start to awaken. And it's also a time where it's good to do those things. For instance, you've got the energy, the momentum of the energy of the season with you to do new things. So it might not be desire for a partner, though that could be part of it, but it could be desire for something else in your life, for a business, for a new creative project, something like that. I'm just going to stick this to the fire element today, but that kind of is where the fire and the wood and the fire kind of interrelate. Social relationships is a big part of the fire element as well. And that's where, if people are a fire element type, they tend to need that sociability. They need friendships and relationships, but particularly that touching aspect of things is kind of part of that. So if you're not a fire element type as such, you still have the ability to feel joy, of course. You still have pleasure. We all have those elements within us. But you might not need that touch as much. You might not need that physical contact as much as someone who is more wired to be a fire element type. And you might be able to get away with longer periods of time without a kind of a sexual relationship or that kind of contact, and be quite happy to be alone for periods of time by yourself and self-sufficient. Whereas one of the aspects of fire is that sociability and that connection with other people. So that might be something to kind of consider if you think that that part of that element is lacking in your life and you would like to foster more joy. There may be joy that might come from the right kind of relationships, the right kind of friendships. And I get that this can be hard. You can't just whip up a friend out of nowhere and think, here's a great friend. Like, those people are hard to come by in life, especially the longer you go along. But it's important that as you get older, that we put ourselves into positions where we can meet other people. And not be despondent that these things don't necessarily occur in our life as quickly as we would like them to. But if you don't place yourself in a position to get to know other people, you will never get to know other people. So you might have to purposefully put yourself in that position. So if you work from home, for instance, you aren't going to meet any people in that workplace very often and connect with them in person. So you might need to go and join some social groups to kind of get that. Whereas if you go into a big office every day, you might have the chance to meet hundreds of people every day, or maybe not hundreds, but 10 people a day. If you go through a security check-in, there's a person that you meet on the door. There's a person that you meet, at the water cooler. There's a person that you meet at the coffee shop. There's a person that you meet at the cafe that you go to every day. This kind of thing, right? So these are part of the fire element and can help to bring that social aspect to our life that helps to foster this joy and this happiness. So that's kind of a little bit more out there in terms of the personality type of it. But I want to talk about how the imbalance of our body physically can actually hamper us in the ability to feel joy, the ability to feel good, to feel happiness. So one of those things could be an overpowerment of those other emotions that I said. So if you're going through a stage of grief, you're going through some sadness, you feel very angry, you have a lot of worry and anxiety, the first thing would be to kind of try to address the reason why you feel those things. And often when you address that, the joy will naturally emerge. Something interesting about the fire element is it includes the housing of the Shen. Now the Shen in Chinese medicine is all of the mental, emotional aspects, or like all of them. So in one way we say, yeah, joy is the emotion of the fire element, but at the same time, all the emotions are also part of it. So I think that's how we could understand that they can all be part of it, because if you're experiencing a lot of worry and anxiety, it's very hard to just experience that joy and that pleasure and that kind of thing. So I hope this video has been somewhat useful and helpful to kind of help understand that how this can be part of it. One of the things I see a lot is that lack of motivation and drive, that lack of the wood element to actually generate the fire, to generate the joy. So it's essentially not knowing what you want. So you can't be happy with something because you don't know what you want. So this can be a long process to kind of work out, what do I really want in life? And then it might be the journey towards getting that actually helps you feel the happiness and the pleasure of things. And these things can be, it can be a long-winded process, but it can be very rewarding to kind of go through that process and to discover those things about yourself. On the physical side of things, a pattern of disharmony that often affects the mind or the Shen and the heart and the fire element is lack of sleep and blood deficiency. So lack of sleep can cause blood deficiency, but also just blood deficiency by itself. So if you've been diagnosed with that kind of a pattern, blood deficiency, liver blood deficiency, spleen blood deficiency, it doesn't really matter what they've said about that, just the blood deficiency aspect means that the mind or the Shen at night can't really rest properly because it rests in that blood. It sounds weird, but that's kind of how it is. It kind of comes to that rest that you're not overthinking at night, you're not dreaming a lot at night, you kind of have a stillness and a coolness kind of going on in your body physically, which then enables you to kind of wake up and go the next day. So if there's a lack of this, then it causes this kind of restlessness to happen in the heart. And that restlessness often causes us to have that excessive desire or that uncontrolled desire. And especially that sexual desire, like uncontrolled sexuality, like feeling like I'm so restless, I need to pace around physically, or fidgety, that kind of stuff. And also this sexuality, like a feeling of desire, and you can't kind of stop that or gratify that desire. Maybe even through self-gratification, you may not be able to gratify that desire if it was really extreme on that end of things. And that can simply be caused by that lack of sleep in Chinese medicine. There's a clear kind of correlation to that. So it wouldn't just be one night of sleep, but continuously having not great sleep, and depending on how severe the type of the level of insomnia was, that could kind of be part of that. And that can explain why people who have really poor sleep can become quite mentally ill. You often see this with homeless people because they either can't find a comfortable place to sleep, or they're very disturbed in their bed. They can't actually fall asleep and rest properly because you're constantly thinking, are people going to rob me or hurt me at night? You might not feel safe and secure if you're sleeping in a tent, or you're sleeping at the back of a store or in a shop front. One of the biggest crimes in that kind of community is homeless on other homeless people. So, it's a very difficult situation. I used to work with a community organisation for many, many years, and I did a homeless food van, and I would hear people's stories in that way. And it wasn't until I heard people say, I was stabbed in the night for my last cigarette from one of the homeless people, I was like, okay, this is really real, and it's very confronting and disturbing. And even if they're in a shelter or something, that there's often this sense of not being able to rest because their body has trained itself to be on this hypervigilance. And then that often leads to people who were not mentally ill before becoming then mentally ill. There's lots of other factors that happen in that. Some of it could be malnutrition, like eating rubbishy sorts of foods, because they're eating like chips and pies and pasties and whatever is kind of given to them, lots of takeaway foods. Maybe drug and alcohol use can kind of affect that as well. And that's the next thing I want to talk about that can affect our mind and our ability to feel pleasure or too much pleasure, or affect our emotions of the fire element. So on one hand, you've got that sleep issue. So sleep is a big part of it. The second one is the use of euphoric type of medications, things that would make you hallucinate, things that would make you feel a sense of euphoria. How does that affect our fire element, our mind? So there's this idea that there are some substances that you might use, or people may use, that it's dose related as to how detrimental it could be for you. Alcohol is a good example of this. So alcohol can actually be used in a medicinal sense, and it is used in Chinese medicine to get the herbs to go to the periphery of the body, to the outside, to the channels. It's often used in sports injury types of formulas, either externally even as a way to get the herbal tincture to, that's what a tincture is, it's a herb soaked in alcohol. But also internally it was used to treat blood stasis essentially in some way. Now it's not like you're drinking a lot of alcohol when you're doing that, you're having a tiny bit of usually a high proof alcohol. That would be kind of either used, it wouldn't make you drunk basically, it would just be a small amount of that. Becoming drunk or tipsy is verging towards that euphoric, right? Or drunk is that euphoric kind of state. And that is definitely depleting your yang of your body, because it's taking the yang from the inside and making it come out to the outside. It's wasting the body's yang. But it's also, and that's what creates that warmness, where you feel that sense of warm in your body, or you don't feel the cold that easily. And it also can cause a drying out effect in our body. So it's drying the moisture. So this is why people who are alcoholics get a lot of redness on their skin, or, that classic brandy nose sort of thing from alcoholism. And you see this to a greater extent quicker in some drugs that affect the shen. They affect the skin. You would notice this like, I can't remember the drug's name. Methamphetamine is probably the one where you see people with really ruddy skin, sores on the skin. I mean, you see this with people that do heroin or some kind of other euphoric type of medicine. Their body starts to wither away. And this isn't just the medication or the drugs that are causing this, but it's part of the lifestyle that comes along with it. Like, you're not really concerned about food now, you're just concerned about drugs, and that's kind of all you're doing. And it might be because of your means, like all your money is being spent on that drug habit versus, available to you and you don't have a home anymore. All these kind of flow-on effects that could happen if you become a drug addict. If that leads to that kind of detriment to you. But what it does in Chinese medicine is it's disturbing your mind, disturbing your shen. Some of these drugs can in turn also cause that blood deficiency, which means then your shen can't properly rest either. But what it's doing in an emotional sense is it's giving you pleasure. It's giving you euphoria. And you have to think, well, how is that happening? Is the drug itself giving you the euphoria, or the alcohol giving you that euphoria, or that release of pain, which again is related to the shen and the heart and the fire element? Pain itself, the ability to feel pain, is a shen aspect, because you don't feel pain when you're sleeping, when you're unconscious. You don't feel pain. You can feel pain in your sleep if you wake up, like if you're conscious. So consciousness is the shen. So when you're unconscious, your shen is like dormant. It's still there, but if you were in a coma and you couldn't wake up, there's a lack of ability of that shen to kind of come out. But you can't feel pain in that circumstance. So the numbing of pain, the dulling of pain, even you could think of it as physical pain or emotional pain from these drugs, these substances. What does that do to our body? Is it just the substance doing it? When the substance wears off, well, that's fine, nothing detrimental has happened. No. In Chinese medicine, we think of it as the substance allowing this utility of resource. So it's actually taking some of that resource and using it up at a higher rate than it's designed to be used, which then in turn affects your life force. So think of it as like an hourglass with the sands of time, the days of our lives.
Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives.
Right? So think about the sands of time. And those sands of time is your life. So imagine you have 100 healthy years. And this hourglass is kind of going down, and each grain might be 1 year. When that runs out, you die. You have 100 healthy years, so that's great, right? You're born, the hourglass is turned up, the sands are going down. What you could think of the drugs or the alcohol doing is actually just making that hole of where the thing come bigger. So more sand is coming out, more years are going out, more time is being used quicker to enable that. Now, how do we think of that? In TCM, they consider that as part of the essence, the kidney essence. So this idea that you're storing resource, and it's only a tiny bit is used. Every little thing that happens in your body, a tiny, tiny bit is used as a catalyst, like an enzyme catalyst, right, to do that change. And you're robbing that resource. Another analogy I use for my students in Chinese medicine is often this idea of like, well, think of that hourglass as like 100 coins in a little sack. And I said to you, it only costs you $1 to live every year. So you've got that sack of coins and you know that I'm going to pay $1 and everything of my life is done, like my rent and my food, and I'm happy and I've got what I need. But if I suddenly get a bit greedy and I think, oh, you know what, I'd really love to go on this massive cruise ship holiday, and I've got no other way of earning any other money, and I use 2 coins that year or 10 coins because I want to have a big party time. And for the whole year, I'm just going to party and get pissed every night and go on a 1-year bender. And that might cost me 10 coins that year instead of 1 coin. So that in turn, you can think of that as coming off your life force. Now, we don't know exactly that is going to happen, but it's an analogy that thinks that you do have this finite resource. These drugs aren't just giving you something, they're costing you something at the same time. There's always that cost to be paid. And when is that cost paid? It's sometimes at the time, but it's often not exactly at the time. It's, might be sometime later, or often people who go through a period of this type of living, they might be fine in their 30s and 40s, but then when they get their 50s and 60s, they might end up having other kinds of health problems that might be there. So those sorts of things tend to cost our body quicker than the detriment of other things like food and a lack of exercise and becoming overweight, or that kind of thing, it costs us, but we don't get that pleasure. We don't get that euphoria from it. Sometimes you could, if you had a lot of crazy foods, I guess you could get a pleasurable sense. And if you are experiencing euphoria from doing something, you can think of that as taxing that essence of your body. Now, does that mean you don't have any pleasure in life and you think, no, I can't tax my essence? Well, this is how some monks think about things. So the monks that say, oh, I'm going to live a long, long time, and that is part of their practice. That's why they don't ejaculate. That's why they don't engage in sexual activity, because they're trying to conserve the essence which is related to that. So we have to have a balance of things, because you want to have pleasure, you want to have joy, you want to have happiness in life, but we don't want to tax our body and have a detriment come from that. So it's unfortunately, it's not sort of like a one easy answer. It's about a balance for you. And if you feel that something is becoming out of control, like you can't control it, or it is controlling you, then that would be a point of where you'd want to try to intervene in it. So I hope this video has been useful and helpful to you. And if it has, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate your support. Hopefully we can grow the channel this year. And if you're interested in learning more about Chinese medicine, I have some courses on it. You can click in the link below the description. I have changed my email address, so please be aware that has changed. And been hacked and spammed and all the rest of it in my other emails. So I appreciate your support on the channel, and I look forward to sharing another video with you soon.